Hi everybody, Nate here from WASD20. Thanks so much for joining me today as I am going to be sharing with you 5 tips for playing tabletop role-playing games with young kids. So before we get into my 5 tips, I do want to address a common question I get, and this doesn't count as one of my tips. Don't hold it against me. And that is, what age should we start playing tabletop role-playing games at? And for every kid, that's going to be different. That is going to be a common theme throughout this video. We're going to be making some generalizations, but every kid is different. They are as varied in their tastes, styles, preferences as we as adults are. And so I think you got to be careful, but I will say that I think generally it's good to start kids around age 5-ish. All right? Maybe 6. Some kids might be ready as young as age 4. I can't really imagine a 3-year-old, but I bet you someone out there has done that. And some kids might not get into it until they're much older. And you might find that a child just can't sit still or can't pay attention very well until they get to be like 8 or 9 years old. Who knows? It totally depends on the kid. And I also think we have to be a little bit careful not to be too pushy. And if we see that a kid isn't enjoying it, give it a year or 2, right? And hopefully they'll eventually get into it. I think we all hope for that. But we also have to be okay with the fact that our kids aren't going to share all of our interests. It can be hard to deal with, but deal with it. All right, that almost qualified as a tip. I apologize. Anyway, tip number 1, run shorter games. I think that in general, especially when we're talking about this age 5 to 6 range, I think it is wise to start small. And if you see that they can handle more and more, that's great. But I would say start at age 5 to 6, 45 minutes to an hour. And just see how it goes. If they're getting into it, if they're asking for more, I think I've recently, just with my 8 and 6-year-old, for the first time, had them say, "That's it? But what about..." And that was a great feeling. It's like, okay, I think we can do more than an hour now. This is cool. So in general, start short and just see how much they can handle. Kids generally have shorter attention spans and just aren't going to be able to sit still that well. Tip number 2 is also related to that, and that is be exciting. Now, part of this is realizing what excites your young players. What do they seem to be into? And that's going to vary for kids just like it does for adults. My boys happen to really like combat. If we don't get into combat after 10 minutes of role-playing or something like that, they get eager and start asking, "When's the next fight, Dad?" But I've heard of other kids who are totally the opposite and will always take the non-combat route. So you got to find out what excites them, what do they like about the game, and that's a great tip in general for tabletop RPGs. But I will say that I think being exciting also means getting more animated than you might. Be able to be goofy. Let yourself go. Try out the funny voices that you might be too embarrassed to try out in front of your home group. I'm not embarrassed about it, but maybe you are. I don't know. But yeah, be energetic, be exciting, be excited, be passionate as a game master. It's always important, but it's all the more important when you're running a game for young kids who might not have a great attention span. If you see the one kid who is disengaging and seeming bored, draw them out, keep things moving fairly quickly, try to keep turns short and all that stuff so that you can keep kids engaged at the table. Tip number 3, keep the tone appropriate. This is something that you're going to have to adjust if you're used to playing with adults. I am used to playing like 90-something% of my games with adults. So when I play with my kids, I have to remember, oh yeah, we're not going to get all into our death descriptions and get all gory like that. We're not going to be mentioning demons or pantheons of gods very much, or much moral ambiguity. We try to keep things fairly simple, good and evil. It's going to be different with every kid, and a lot of that is going to depend on you as the game master or as the parent. That's another big important point. Talk to the parents. If these are not your own kids, talk to the parents. Let them know what you're going to be doing. Explain it to them. And maybe ask the kids and the parents what sorts of books and movies and video games are they used to. And if you find that they're used to some pretty mature content, that will give you a good gauge of what you can do in your game without crossing a line for them or for the parent. So keep the tone age appropriate, and especially if it's not your own children, veer more to the side of cautiousness. Tip number 4, select the right system. Now, what is the right system? There's no right system. You probably know this. Any system can work, I think. Now, there might be some systems, if we're talking about age appropriateness, that get a little bit too dark or weird, and that's something to be considered. But for the most part, I think you can make any system work. Pathfinder is a pretty complex system compared to most of the tabletop role-playing games I played. I prefer less complex games, and yet when my son was 5 years old, the very first game he played in was a Pathfinder game with me, and we made it work. He could hardly read, so I ended up doing a lot, but we made it work. It was fun. My game of choice is Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but I'm still not to the point of playing this with my 6 and 8-year-old boys. We actually started playing a lot of Hero Kids. And this is a great system. I highly recommend it. It's really cheap. I'll put links to all these products in the video description. But this is a great, very rules-light system that I would recommend you check out. The other one that we have now moved up to, and I do say up, it's slightly more complex, and it's a little bit closer to D&D 5th edition, is Index Card RPG. So this is a fun one. I definitely recommend you check it out. I have a full review. Another one that I've heard a lot of good things about, but personally we don't care for that much ourselves, is No Thank You Evil. This is from Monty Cook Games. It uses the Cypher system, and I would say it's a great game overall. It's very whimsical, fun, and just encourages kind of this gonzo creativity. But my boys didn't enjoy it as much as they do just getting down into some Hero Kids or ICRPG. I do hope to do a more full look at some of these game systems sometime in the future, but if you have game systems that you would suggest for young kids, definitely put those down in the comments below. I'd love to hear. Tip number 5, encourage creativity and be flexible. Kids are going to be creative. They're going to get into this. Expect them to have fun and get pretty into it, for most kids at least. And in doing so, they might start to break some of your expectations in the way that you normally do things and the way the rules of this system work. So be flexible. I would say that maybe there's a time when you do kind of hone things in a little bit and rein in the craziness, but let them go a little bit crazy. Let them be descriptive and contribute to the world. I let my son grab the marker and say, and then there's this thing right here on the map, and it's like, sure. And that works. Kids are incredibly imaginative, and it would be a real shame to kind of squelch that. So definitely I would recommend being more flexible than you would with a group of adults, and just letting them go a little bit more, at least in the beginning. All right, so those are 5 tips that I have, guys. I could say a whole lot more. I ran a panel on this topic actually a couple years ago, and I'm going to put a link to that in the video description. It was a lot of fun. I had some really great experienced game masters who play a lot with kids, so definitely go check that out. I also want to take a moment to thank the WASD20 patrons. These people are amazing. They're throwing their support behind my work, making it happen, and I am immensely grateful. So thank you, patrons. Because of the patron support, my channel just reached a new milestone, and at that milestone that I set on Patreon, I promise now 2 live streams a month, whether these are mappenings or mini painting or some other ideas that I've got cooking up. That's a really cool thing. So there's some pretty cool rewards, and there are some milestones and goals that I have set as a creator. So thanks again, patrons. You can check out a link in the description below if you're interested in joining the patron army. All right, I better shut up now. Thank you so much for joining me. I really want to hear from you guys down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. And everybody take care. You'll see me again very soon.